There is an enormous difference between knowing facts about yourself and truly knowing yourself. You probably know a lot about you. You know what you like and what you don't. You know your strengths at work. You know what irritates you, what moves you, what exhausts you. You have a narrative about who you are that has been constructed over years, which you use to present yourself to the world and to understand yourself in moments of reflection. But knowing facts about yourself is not the same thing as having inner clarity. Inner clarity is something else. It is a state. It is a quality of presence with yourself that doesn't depend on a narrative, doesn't depend on explanation, and doesn't depend on external approval to sustain itself. It is when you know, not through your head, but through something deeper. Who you are at the level that precedes all the stories you tell about yourself. And when you reach this place, something radical changes in the way you relate to the world around you. The things that used to shake you no longer hold the same power over you. Not because you've become insensitive, not because you've learned to suppress what you feel, but because you have developed a center, an internal point of gravity that does not shift with every external wind that blows in your direction. Someone's critical opinion still reaches you, but it doesn't knock you down because you already know who you are before any criticism. The difficult situation still happens, but it doesn't define you because you have enough clarity to know what is circumstance and what is essence. Fear still appears, but it no longer drives because you've learned to recognize it as information and not as identity. This is inner clarity, and it is not a gift that some people have and others don't. It is a skill that is developed, deepened, and strengthened with practice and honesty. But before talking about how it develops, I need to talk about what prevents it. Most people lack inner clarity not due to a lack of intelligence nor a lack of self-knowledge in the conventional sense, but for a very specific reason that is rarely named honestly. They have never stopped seeing themselves through the eyes of others. Since the beginning of your life, you have been formed by reflections. The reflection of what your parents saw in you. The reflection of what your teachers projected onto you. The reflection of what your friends expected from you. The reflection of what the surrounding culture defined as value, success, and adequacy. And you began internalizing these reflections. They stayed, they settled, they became the inner voice that evaluates every action, every choice, and every feeling you have. Much of what you believe about yourself today is not your own conclusion. It is the echo of others' judgments that you absorbed before you were mature enough to question them. This isn't anyone's fault in particular. It is the human process of identity formation. It is inevitable to some extent. But a point comes in life where a person needs to make a fundamental separation, the separation between what was installed and what is genuinely yours. And this separation is the beginning of inner clarity. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The journey of becoming who you truly are, not who the world taught you to be, not who circumstances forced you to be, not who you needed to be to survive in certain environments, but who you are when all these layers are removed one by one with patience and honesty. It is a lifelong process. There is no definitive finish line where you can say, I am completely individuated. Now I have total clarity about everything. But there are milestones. There are moments when you realize you've reached a deeper level of yourself, where something that used to confuse you is now clear, where a reaction that used to be automatic is now conscious and chosen. And each of these milestones changes the quality of your presence in the world. Write in the comments now, I know myself, I trust myself, I choose myself. It's not a hollow affirmation. It is a declaration of direction. It is you telling the part of you that still seeks external approval to feel real, that the center of gravity is shifting, that it is moving from the outside back to the inside, that the authority over who you are belongs to no one but you. Let's talk about something practical, because inner clarity isn't an abstract concept that only exists in theory. It manifests in concrete, daily situations. And the clearest way to understand what inner clarity is and isn't is to observe how you react when something shakes you. Think of a criticism you received recently. It could be something small. Someone commented on your work, a choice you made, or the way you behaved in a certain situation. It may have been said with good intent or bad intent. It may have been fair or completely unfair. What happened inside you? If you ruminated for hours or days, if the criticism kept spinning in your head relentlessly, if you went looking for the opinions of others to confirm the criticism was wrong, if you felt a knot in your stomach that lasted long after the words were spoken, that is important information, not about the value of the criticism, but about where your center of gravity is. When the center of gravity is outside of you, in other people, in approval, in recognition, in validation, every criticism has the power to shift the ground beneath you, because the ground isn't in you. It's out there. And everything out there can be taken away, can change, or can disappear without warning. When the center of gravity is inside you, the criticism still arrives. You still hear it. You still consider if there is something true in it worth integrating, but it doesn't shift the ground because the ground is in you. And what is in you cannot be taken away by anyone. This is the fundamental difference between a person who is easily shaken and a person who remains centered even in the face of pressure, conflict, and adversity. It's not that the second person feels less. Often they feel more, because inner clarity increases sensitivity rather than diminishing it. It's that they have a point of return, an internal place they come back to when they are pushed out of themselves by some circumstance. And this point of return develops in a specific way. It develops through radical honesty with oneself, not the kind of honesty that is cruel and destructive. Not the self-criticism that disguises itself as self-knowledge, but is actually just another judgment voice installed by past experiences. Honesty in the sense of seeing what is there without distorting it to look better or worse than it is. Seeing your fears without calling them something else. Seeing your repetitive patterns without building elaborate justifications for them. Seeing your contradictions without needing to resolve them immediately. Seeing the parts of you that are still in process without demanding they be finished before you deserve self-respect. This ability to see yourself with clarity, without the filter of self-defense and without the filter of excessive self-criticism, is what builds the center. Because when you truly know yourself, when you have seen your darkest parts and yet still chosen yourself, when you know your limits without being ashamed of them and know your strengths without needing to exhibit them, you become very difficult to manipulate, very difficult to shake, very difficult to be redefined by the opinion or behavior of someone else. Psychological manipulation works by filling the gaps in self-knowledge. It enters through the blind spots, through unrecognized insecurities, through the fears you haven't admitted to yourself, through the needs you never learned to name. A person who knows themselves deeply has far fewer entry points for this kind of dynamic, not because they are perfect or lack insecurities, but because they know them. And what you know about yourself cannot be used against you in the same way as what you don't know. This changes the quality of all your relationships. Think about how you behave when you are with someone who clearly knows who they are. They don't need you to agree with everything they say to feel secure. They can hear a different perspective without feeling that their identity is being threatened. They can say no without needing an elaborate speech to justify it. They can say yes without needing approval to confirm it was the right choice. This person has a specific presence, a quality of being in the world that communicates something without needing words. It naturally inspires respect, not because they demand it, but because they radiate something you intuitively recognize as solid and real. You want to be that person, and you can be. But there is a specific path to this, and it passes through a place that most people avoid with impressive skill. It passes through silence. Not silence as the absence of noise, but silence as the absence of intentional distraction. The kind of silence you create when you stop filling every available moment with external stimulus. When you turn off the podcast in the car and stay only with your thoughts. When you put the phone on the other side of the room before bed and stay with what you're feeling instead of going straight to social media. When you finish one task and, before starting the next, give yourself a moment of simply being. In these moments of real silence is where you begin to hear what was being muffled by the constant noise. And what you find there isn't always comfortable. Frequently, it isn't. It might be a worry you were avoiding, an emotion you didn't want to feel, a truth about a situation in your life that you knew but weren't ready to admit. But it can also be something very different. It can be a clarity about what you truly want that was being obscured by the speed of the day-to-day, an intuition about a path you hadn't yet allowed yourself to seriously consider. A sense of who you are when you aren't performing for anyone, when you aren't trying to meet any expectation, when you aren't in constant production and delivery mode. This version of you that appears in the silence is the closest to the truth of who you are. And the more time you spend with it, the more you know it, the more solid your center becomes. Your own presence becomes more recognizable to yourself. It becomes easier to distinguish what is genuinely yours from what was installed by others. It becomes more natural to act from a place of alignment rather than a place of fear or sought approval. Neuroscience has something interesting to say about this. When you regularly practice states of presence with yourself, when you develop the habit of observing yourself without immediate judgment, you literally change the structure of your brain. The region called the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and perspective-taking, strengthens. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center responsible for fear and threat reactions, becomes less reactive to daily situations. In practical terms, this means you start to respond instead of react. You begin to have a gap, however small, between the stimulus and your response to it. And in that gap lies your freedom. There lies your ability to choose how you want to position yourself before what is happening, instead of being automatically swept away by the first emotion that appears. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps and founded logotherapy, described this in a way that became engraved in the history of human thought. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This space is not automatic. It must be cultivated. And that is exactly what deep self-knowledge does. It expands that space. It gives you more time, more clarity, and more resources to choose how you want to respond to life instead of just reacting to it. When you start living more in the space of chosen response than in the space of automatic reaction, your life changes in a way that is hard to describe to those who haven't experienced it. Situations that used to knock you completely off balance become manageable, not necessarily easy, but manageable. You go through difficult things with a different quality of presence. You remain recognizable to yourself even when everything around you is unstable. You maintain clarity on what matters even when the external noise is too loud. This is what it means to be unshakable. It's not insensitivity, it's not emotional distance, it's not the illusion that nothing affects you. It is the ability to be affected, to fully feel what is happening, to be present in the difficulty without being destroyed by it, to cross what needs to be crossed without losing sight of who you are in the process. This capacity doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from favorable circumstances. It doesn't come from a life without challenges. It comes from within. It comes from a relationship honest enough and deep enough with yourself that no external circumstance can steal what is genuinely yours. And what is genuinely yours is exactly what no one can give you and no one can take away. It is who you are before the stories, before the titles, before the achievements and the failures, before everything that happened to you and everything you did. This core exists in you now. It's not something you need to build from scratch. It's something you need to rediscover. Something that was there before all the layers were added by years of adaptation, performance, and survival. And inner clarity is the process of removing those layers with care and courage, not all at once, not violently, but with the patience of someone who understands that what is being revealed is something precious that deserves to be treated with respect. When you truly know yourself, not as a list of characteristics and preferences, but as a presence that has clarity about itself, something fundamental changes. You stop needing the external world to confirm what you internally already know. You stop seeking authorization from others to be what you are. You stop modifying what you think, feel, and believe according to what the situation seems to demand for you to be accepted. And in that act of stopping, in that act of simply being what you are with clarity and consistency, a presence emerges that is far more powerful than anything the effort of pleasing could ever create. Because the world responds differently to someone who knows who they are. Not because this person is perfect, not because they don't make mistakes, not because they don't have moments of doubt or difficulty, but because even in imperfection, even in doubt, even in difficulty, there is something in this person that remains recognizable. There is a common thread, an essential consistency that doesn't change with the wind. And that consistency is exactly what people around feel, even if they can't name it. It is what inspires trust without you having to ask. It is what creates respect without you having to demand it. It is what allows for genuine connections instead of connections based on performance and mutual approval. Inner clarity is not a state of arrogance. It's not thinking you have all the answers. It's not closing yourself off to learning or the perspective of others. It is the ability to receive all of that, criticism, different perspectives, new information, without losing the thread of who you are in the process. It is the ability to be moved without being swept away, to be affected without being destroyed, to grow without losing yourself. This is the stability that comes from truly knowing yourself, and it is available to you. Not at some future point after years of intense inner work. It begins to develop from the moment you decide that self-knowledge is not a luxury for when you have time. It is a priority. Because everything in your life, the quality of your decisions, the quality of your relationships, the quality of your presence at work, in family, in every situation you traverse, everything is directly influenced by the clarity you have or don't have about who you are. When you truly know yourself, nothing else shakes you in the same way. Not because the world becomes kinder, not because challenges disappear, not because people around change their behavior, but because you have changed the foundation on which you stand. And a solid foundation does not need to fear the storm. It simply remains. Firm, present, yours.